So what should we be doing in this space? But I think we're calling for that, right? So back in April, our chief legal officer really put a post out to say, we think that facial recognition technology, can that information be used against you?
This conversation is getting very exciting.
Exactly.
I think there's going to be something.
Come on, someone's got to say China. We'll save that for the next question, I think, because I'd like to come back to that. But I want to, you talk, Richard, about fundamental or foundational principles for this. I want to add the word diversity. And I was reminded, I've just got a tweet from someone in Adelaide saying that a quote that I used previously, which goes around the world, that's just been used in this seminar about AI in Adelaide. And this is the quote from me, but this is what I want to do. We cannot allow our world to be organized by algorithms whose creators are dominated by one gender, one ethnicity, one age, or one culture. And it's so important. It's bad enough in computer science, in software. In AI, it's even more important because of this bias issue. And it's a really, really difficult problem. If I had an answer, you know, I would be either very rich or very, very famous. There is no answer to this, and it is primarily, for me, about gender, but it is also about ethnicity, culture, age, accessibility. We really cannot afford for this world to be dominated by one type of person, culture, age, gender. But that's what it is. I'm just on the board of a country, not my own, who's just appointing AI professors, and I'm on the advisory panel for them. And the headhunters sent us the long list. People, there was not one woman on out of the 36 people that had applied for these incredibly well-funded chairs. And the thing is, I realized the other day, we have, in the UK, finally, last week, computer science was recognized as being the discipline that will pay the highest salary for graduates. And that's been true for a long time in America. In the UK, it's been hidden in the stats as IT, and finally it's come out now. We're measuring it as computer science. And the tables came out last week, and it's that, you know, if you want to earn the best salaries, be a computer scientist. And the salary for people, if you can just spell the word artificial intelligence, you get a high salary. And in many different languages. But if, you know, seriously, people with AI skills, you'd be paying those salaries. And, you know, in Stanford, they're talking about 6- or 7-figure salaries for a PhD student from AI in Stanford to go and work in Silicon. 7-figure salaries for the first job. You know, in the UK, it's £50,000 for a graduate with the right skills. Now, that sounds wonderful, but you paint the picture of Silicon Valley, the tech industry, and those high salaries, and the competitiveness that will come with that to a woman, and just say, I don't want anything to do with that. It's not a culture that appeals to women. It doesn't. You look at me, strange. Why aren't they doing it? It's just not a culture that appeals. Somehow it is a very competitive, very 24/7, very you and your machine culture. This is not even, no matter you paint the picture, but you're going to cure cancer. If you go into AI, you can cure cancer. I mean, look, medicine is now, when I started in choosing my career, I was told by my headmistress when I was choosing my A-levels that I wanted to be a medic and I was good at maths and I wanted to do biology and chemistry. And she said, Wendy, medicine is not a career for women. You will not do biology and chemistry at my school. So in the 1970s, 60s, you just did what your headmistress said. So I did maths and I've had a fabulous career. But where was I going with that one? It's the culture of and Silicon Valley is toxic in terms of women in technology. It's toxic. They get treated appallingly. I mean, we have such a big problem to solve, to change a culture that's going to get women into the workforce. Sorry.
I completely agree. I wish you'd been here last week for the Women in Tech event, and I think we would have loved to have you there.
How many men attended that event?
Quite a bit. Interestingly enough,
Worst of all, stand to a women in tech event that's only women.
you know, it was interesting because I was at the Lean-In event, and I was one of the moderators, and we had 12 panelists. There were 4 women and 8 men on that panel, so that's a good start. But going back to all the conversation that was happening in the context of potential for bias, that's where we sort of started. A couple of things you all mentioned. One is there doesn't seem to be a standard, right? Like corporates have their standard, governments have their own standard. There's no standard in terms of the ethics behind the AI. And then we also discussed sort of bias in context of gender diversity, and we talked about, you know, diverse idea coming into technology and the startups and so on. So thinking about, there's a very simple system, and my husband used to be a part of it before. It's called Doctors Without Borders. So anytime there's a need, they just fly a doctor out and they help, literally that. So how far are we, do you think, from AI without borders? You know, having that standardization, having that sharing, having the data sharing. God knows some of our startups could use the data that's available in some of the other countries. How far away are we from that? No difficult questions today.
Actually, I have a problem. I think the algorithms don't care whether you are male or female. The algorithms don't understand ethics, I think. Ethics is something we layer on, or what is right or wrong. So the way I look at it is the algorithm do not know. It just learn from the data, right? So if you think you want to build, take bias out of it, then I think you need to build a layer on top of it that try to test for whether it's sound, whether it's biased or not. But I would not say it's a problem with the AI. I would say it's a problem in how we build it, right? So I think we have to be careful not to mix up the technology aspect about it and the social, ethical aspect of it, which are actually, in my mind, 2 separate layers. Now, as for women in technology, a wonderful CTO, the best machine learning person in town. She is a woman, right? So she does wonderful work. She's the one helping build this wonderful company, right? So I don't think there's anything stopping women. It's open to everybody.
I think there's a lot stopping there. I'm sorry, you've got a fantastic example there, but there just aren't enough women in this industry.
Unfortunately, this side of the panel, I have to agree with Dave on this one. Richard, your thoughts on AI without borders?
Yeah. Well, so, okay, let me try and take this question in another direction. Slightly different way. Okay, who here still hand wash his or her clothes? Okay. Have you heard of the washing machine? All right. So you guys all have washing machine, right? Right. You all have washing machine, right? So it's a piece of technology that you bought. You brought it home. Oh, you didn't bring it home. So you brought it home. You install it, and that's it. You pretty much just run it whenever you need it, right? So that's it, right? But with AI, I think it's a different way to think about the technology itself. You kind of constantly have to care and feed it, just like a 2-year-old child. And how you train your models or your child, there's some parallels to it, right? I have a friend, he's in high frequency trading on Wall Street and all that kind of stuff. He has a lot of models that he developed himself, and he doesn't have any kids, but he treats his models like children, right? He has names for them, and it's interesting. It's interesting because, again, whether is it AI without borders or anything like that, I think there's a fundamental shift the way we need to think about the technology itself, because it's something that it's evolving, it's something that's learning, and we've got to think about it in a whole new different way. yes, data is part of it, but there's so many parts of the equation in that sense.
Very quickly, you say he has this thing that he calls his babies, right? And he trains it, right? He trains it. Actually, he is putting input in there. So that's what I'm talking about. The algo by itself does not know. It's the person putting that influence, moving it one way or the other. That aspect is coming from the human. Right? Yeah.
Folks, I have about 3 more pages of written questions here, but in the interest of time, it's 6:15. I'm going to open this up to the audience at the moment, and really, if the smart, brilliant audience does not have any questions, firstly, I'd be surprised, but secondly, we can get back to my set of questions. Does that sound good? So let me open it up. Is there any questions up there? Do we have another microphone floating around somewhere?
Use this one and we'll...
Okay. I'll pass this back to the panel because one of you...
Other people might, but shout your question.
So you mentioned about all of you mentioned about how worried you are about the biases that are putting in the algorithm and out in the decision-making process. But what about seeing it in a more positive way, which will mean, like for instance, using AI in order to identify our own biases. I'll give you one example that is quite funny. Is an AI they used an AI in the judiciary system in the US, and they identified that if you are going in the tribunal around 11 a.m., you are more likely to have a harsh punishment than if you go for 2 p.m. because apparently the judges are hungry at 11 and they are not they are well rested at 2 p.m. So I want to see AI more as a positive way of identifying our own biases rather than worrying that we put our own biases into the system.
Yeah, but the same, I mean, I'm going to throw that back in. I'm sorry to sound negative because I'm not. I'm very positive about AI. I don't want to stop it. I want us to do it responsibly, develop it responsibly. But the same sort of work showed that black people in America get harder sentences than white people, and that's the same sort of, it's AI analyzing data that, so that uncovered a useful fact, but we can use AI to uncover other biases as well that are, yeah. Anyone want to?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and I think it's something that it should generate more discussions and more thinking in that area itself, and maybe perhaps you also perhaps touching on a little bit of that privacy aspect of it, right? Like Wendy mentioned about the sentences being melted out depending on the race of the defendant, and if you think about that, are those kind of data points something that at some point in time gets removed in the sentencing itself? If we think that, hey, we're so biased in this whole process itself, perhaps those are the kind of data points that then get removed. How do you shield that? How do you keep that privacy that's there that hopefully lessen the influence on the judgments that's meant out? So it's a great point. I don't think there's a standard answer to everything, but it's cause for a lot of discussions and debates as well on how do we not just have one side of the technology to do something, but really have a diverse set of capabilities to weigh in on that, so that there's a better way of us assessing the credibility of it, the suitability of perhaps any predictions that then goes into the decision making itself.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, says that all models are wrong, but some models are more useful than others. Yeah. And it depends on your boundary conditions and your start point assumptions. Absolutely. What I tend to hear from all these AI conversations is we seem to think that it's the panacea for everything, that if you invent or you innovate a certain algorithm, it can solve everything. And the reality is it doesn't. And my second comment is, I think at the end of the day, while we aspire to remove biases, for what purpose are we trying to achieve? And I come from the perspective of the entrepreneur path. When you are trying to do your customer development, you do a set of interviews, you see what biases are reflected from the data. Then you identify what exactly is the problem that you can solve that helps you gain traction. So biases are not necessarily bad, because a lot of it are societal driven and culturally driven, and it's not something you can just eliminate. Just because you identify the bias and now you take out the bias of the data, you might be in for a good shock when you try and develop that model and you apply in a particular context.
Yeah, so can I do that before you answer, just so I remember, because that's a very, very good point, thank you. And I was reminded of the big paper that I read about being an academic bias was from a team at Carnegie Mellon University who were doing natural language processing. And they trained an algorithm, I forget what it was to do, but it was trained on newspapers, I think, newspaper articles, something like that. And they detected a gender bias in the algorithm. It had learnt from the language in the newspapers, and it detected a gender bias. So the paper from this very good team said, so we were able to correct for that. And I think, what, surely the answer is actually to change the bias in culture, in society, rather than train your algorithm to correct for it, because what right have researchers to do that correction? Because if they can correct for bias, then that means other people can put bias in. So there is a world there, and it's the same with the health stuff. Doctors don't always make the right decisions, right? So when you train from medical records on what and talk to, you don't necessarily get the right decisions, because it's not a perfect world. Never will be a perfect world. But anyway, that was a really good point. Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. All right, Chris, thanks for the question. So quality and reliability. I think the way to think about it is this, right? Yes, we're looking at, let's say, natural language processing type of capabilities, or facial recognition, for example. And I think when you put it into a lot of the, media hype or anything like that, it starts to say, oh, you can use this for anything, right? And that's where a lot of the times the questions then come in. Is the right technical capability there? Does it have that kind of quality mark that you're looking for in solving a particular problem? Or is it perhaps just extending the human capability just a little bit in that sense, that you're not dependent on the technology to make the decision for you, but just helping you in a small fashion or something like that? And then the reliability of it, I think, we all talk about this in the autonomous vehicles debate that's been going on, right? Anytime one of those vehicles kills, fortunately, kills someone or injures someone, it's international news. But we have how many fatalities every day on the roads in the world today by humans? So we get a lot of all these kind of perceptions, if you will, right? Like, are we delegating every decision over to the machine, or is it just augmenting the human itself? And if it's augmentation, I think there's a fair, reasonable chance of getting better. But when you delegate fully, then the quality and reliability aspect of it is so paramount that, yeah, you really got to make that consideration whether the technology is in that state to be able to do that.
So just picking up slightly, I'm sorry, this is really, there was something I picked up on the BBC News the other day. Talking about aeroplane, the safest form of transport is flying, right? This is someone who was used to have a fear of flying, and now I travel everywhere. I got cured. But anyway, I mean, almost all aircraft accidents are human error. And so they're talking about pilotless planes and everything being automated. Would you get in an aircraft that didn't have a human being there? In what? Yeah, but they're there. The point is, it's a psychological thing. It's psychological. Well, you see, I would, I think. I would. But it's a psychological thing. And the thing about the machines killing someone, I absolutely take your point. I use that sort of argument. I mean, I was never, when I took my driving test, do you have to take a driving test in Singapore? I wasn't taught ethics. Right? When I did my driving test, it's up to me to decide who I kill in an accident. Right? But a machine kills one person, and it is international news, and it's psychological. And the problem is, it's the impact that has on the development of the technology and the companies, because their share prices will plummet if they have an accident. Although we have them all the time, but so it's a really interesting question that is not just to do with the technology. There's a whole cultural.
This is getting very warm, and this is pre-drinks, and I can see some debate happening at the back of the room. One quick comment from you. Yes.
I just want to respond to that, because if you study those cases where there were fatalities very closely, actually, the human is mostly involved, not the cars, not the autonomous
Yes,
cars themselves.
it's the same as the aircraft.
And not a single human driver would have been able to avoid the accident.
That's not
So-
true.
so it's-
That's
it's
not
the-
true
it's
of the
the
one in
amount.
California where the car ran over that lady who was crossing the road.
But then look at it very carefully.
Oh, well, human being might well have missed her. That's an example of one where the machine was at fault. The driver wasn't. The driver was watching Netflix or something, wasn't he or she? Right. But the example I'm thinking of, that poor lady crossing the road, that was a machine.
So we have another question. We leave that question for drinks,
Very
yeah?
interesting.
That's something over beers.
I want to talk
Yes.
about China. I want to ask about China.
Sorry, my question is not about China, but it is about diversity. So bias into AI can impose a bias on the result, and there is potentially a lack of diversity in the AI, let's call it ecosystem of people involved in it. So how can we use AI and machine learning to help redress the balance? How can it be used to positively influence that? Is this technology here part of the solution to that problem? Can we curate a more diverse environment of AI scientists and workers and so forth, using the tools we've already made?
I would love to. How would you do it?
I don't know. I'm asking you. I'm not an AI person.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I don't have an answer to that. At the moment, what we're doing in the UK is thinking about ensuring that we bring diversity in through the skills training, and bring in people from very different backgrounds: history, psychology, philosophy, economics. Train them to work in AI, not necessarily as the machine learning programmers, but to work in interdisciplinary teams, to develop, to curate the data sets, to test the algorithms for bias and accountability. So that's sort of the approach. I really, really, though, want to get diverse workforce becoming machine learning programmers as well, but I think that's a harder problem to crack because it's very cultural. But it doesn't mean we give up and don't. But in terms of using AI to solve the problem, let me think about it.
Thank you.
I think the solution to a problem is not AI. Solution to the problem is policy. Governments can set policy about how they develop their resources and manpower. We can
What did you say? Manpower?
Or should people power, manpower? But you know, so it's not a. It's
Cheap joke.
okay, right. And the thing about autonomous vehicle killing 1 person or 2 person, actually not where you should be worried about. You should be worried about if they get hacked, systematically hacked. Yeah. Right. But that's not a problem with AI. Yeah. That's also a problem with security, right? So I'm just trying to make sure we don't give AI a bad name.
Thank you. One last question. Maybe we'll take it from you. Somebody, but yes. Since when you're saying I should take it from woman power, let's take it from women.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Give it to the lady now. Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Alia, and thank you so much. I enjoyed the talk. And I think we talk about the diversity, we talk about the bias, we talk about how to make it positive and how to make it great. I can think about it is involves the kind of the design thinking, so-called design thinking into AI. Like I think everything is a dynamic process, no matter how now we worry about. But in the future we have the new worry. So it is dynamic thing. So if we involve the design thinking into the AI, then it is a continuous process. That is a way to make it positive in the future. And my background is using AI to do the education, so I also think so the future, like how we teach the kids, how we involve them.
I would like to bottle you and take you back to the UK because I think that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, so now I do online course to teach the 10 years old what is artificial intelligence. I think for them it is something weird, something so smart, but we want to use a simple way to let them know. Actually, AI is just something easy, maybe 3 steps. We do a machine learning, and end of the course, what I give is what is our future, how we use AI. So I
So
do believe, like those kids, they have the knowledge about AI.
So is yours a comment, or did you have a question specifically though? Is that a comment? Yeah? Okay. No, I was wondering whether, because I know that
Yes.
you were coming to ask them.
My
Yeah.
final question is, how do you think of the education about AI, and do you have some kind of thoughts in this area? Thank you so much.
So, yes, I think it's wonderful you're teaching AI to primary school. Okay, well, sort of 10-year-old is sort of primary. I think actually we need to have computing. In the UK, we've introduced computing at all levels now. This will help us, I hope, all levels, not just to bring more diversity in. But we absolutely need teachers like you. We need teachers that understand and that can paint the picture to do this well, because if computing or AI is taught badly, it puts everybody off. It can be a very boring subject if it's taught by people that don't understand it. I actually, 2 things. One, my second research work in computing back in the 80s was using Logo. I don't know if you've heard of Logo. It was developed by Seymour Papert at MIT, and it was about teaching kids how to program a turtle. It was a functional programming language. So that was sort of teaching AI, so that's where I started. But I wanted to pick up on your question, and the chap over there with the British accent who asked the question about using AI, I've thought of the answer, and I give this in some of my talks. So basically, I think, I started in computing with intelligent tutoring systems. So this is using AI to teach as opposed to teaching about AI. But my feeling is that AI will not replace teachers hopefully, in the short to medium, not in my lifetime anyway, we'll see where it goes. But I think in terms of personal tutoring and giving people, I tell the story of how I was always very good at maths, and when I was 7 years old, I was teaching the younger kids how to do maths, because it was just, it just came naturally to me. But I could never ski. I'm hopeless at skiing. And I used to spend all my time falling over on the nursery slopes And eventually the instructors would give up with picking me up and trying to help me. They'd all go off to the higher slopes and I'd go off to the bar, right? Because I just couldn't do it. What I needed was a personal coach, because I needed to be given the confidence to do it. And I can see now how all the kids who can't, I mean, in Singapore, everyone does maths, don't they? I don't know, but we have lots of people, kids in the UK who can't do maths. And, you know, and are never going to get into these high-paying jobs because they don't have the math skills. And they need personal coaches. And we can use AI to create those personal coaches that can grow up with the kids. And you could use that to actually encourage people all along. I don't mean to just say work in AI, but to be a much more subjective help in terms of what they prepare for and what their careers they do than necessarily the teachers or the parents do, which they're very biased sometimes, teachers and parents. So anyway, that sort of answers both of them.
Thank you. I'm very excited that you're a young lady and you're actually teaching AI. I'm going to talk to you after this at networking. Very exciting. So, folks, we are run out of time, but we didn't even do China. So, talk to Dame Wendy Hall about two things: Harrison Ford and China. Okay, at the end of this. So, big thank you to all three of you. Really appreciate your time. Can we give them a big round of applause for it? Thank you so much. And on behalf of SGInnovate, thank you for making time to be here with us, and thank you to the audience as well. And last but not the least, I want to thank the talent and events team at SGInnovate. They do a lot of wonderful work, so thank you folks as well. Big round of applause for them as well.
Well, thank you, Suu Kyi. Thank you once again. Round of applause for our panelists. The night is still young. It's 6:30. You know, some of them will still be around. Feel free to mingle. There are investors here. There are startups here. There's also talents on here. Otherwise, the floor is yours. We've got beverages, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, and good food and company. All right. Thank you for a pleasant evening. See you around.
Shake your hand. I know you have to run, but thank you. Running out of here.